The year 1587 was a time of immense pressure and ambition for England. Queen Elizabeth I, the Virgin Queen, sat on a throne besieged by enemies, most notably the formidable Spanish Empire. The New World, a vast, unexplored continent brimming with rumored riches, was the key to power. For Spain, it was already a source of unimaginable wealth, a steady stream of gold and silver that funded its colossal army and navy. For England, it was a frontier of desperate hope and a chance to assert its dominance. Sir Walter Raleigh, a dashing courtier and a man of boundless ambition, was the driving force behind this vision. He saw beyond mere plunder. He envisioned a permanent English foothold, a thriving colony that would be a source of resources and a base from which to challenge Spanish control. His previous attempts had failed. In 1585, a military-style expedition had been founded, but the men, mostly soldiers, were ill-suited for the long, patient work of farming and building. They starved, they quarreled with the indigenous peoples, and they eventually abandoned the settlement, leaving behind only the skeleton of a fort and a legacy of mistrust. Raleigh learned a crucial lesson. To build an empire, he needed more than just warriors. He needed families. The third expedition, launched in the summer of 1587, was different. Its purpose was to build a city, not a garrison. Aboard the 3 ships, the flagship Lion, the Cinquefoil, and the Isabella, were 115 colonists. They were not hardened veterans, but ordinary people, farmers, carpenters, blacksmiths, and their wives and children. This was a monumental leap of faith. The journey across the Atlantic was a terrifying ordeal, a 5-week gauntlet of unforgiving seas. The ships were small, cramped, and foul-smelling. Rations were carefully portioned, and fresh water was a precious commodity. Disease was a constant threat, and the storms were so fierce they could toss a ship like a toy. Yet in their hearts, these colonists carried a powerful light of hope, a shared dream of owning their own land and forging a new life, free from the constraints of the old world. Their leader was John White, a man of remarkable talent and quiet strength. As a skilled artist, he meticulously documented every step of their journey, sketching the ships, the coastline, and the faces of the people. His illustrations would later become the only visual record of their daily lives and the indigenous people they encountered. He was not just a leader, he was a husband and a father. His daughter, Eleanor Dare, and her husband, Ananias, were with him, along with Eleanor's younger sister, Margaret, and her family. The stakes were intensely personal for John White. When the ships finally reached the shores of Roanoke Island, their hopes were dampened by the desolate sight of the previous fort's remains. The skeletal structure of the old garrison was all that was left, the houses destroyed and overgrown with thick weeds. The local tribes, particularly the CROATOAN, were wary, their initial hospitality replaced by a chilling hostility born from previous conflicts. Despite the setback, the colonists' spirits remained high. They set about their work with a renewed sense of purpose. Men toiled under the sun, felling trees to build new homes, while women cultivated gardens with seeds they had brought from England. Children played on the beach, their laughter a hopeful counterpoint to the quiet tension in the air. On August 18th, 1587, a new life, a new symbol of their future, came into the world. Eleanor Dare gave birth to a daughter whom they named Virginia Dare. She was the first English child born in the Americas, a tiny, fragile sign of their permanence in this strange new land. But the reality of their situation was far more precarious than they had imagined. The summer was unforgivingly hot, and the crops they planted struggled to grow in the unfamiliar soil. The native tribes, once a potential source of food and trade, became increasingly hostile. Supplies were running dangerously low, and the long, hard winter was looming. A desperate council was held. The fate of the entire colony hung in the balance. The colonists came to a difficult, unanimous decision. They needed a lifeline, and that lifeline could only come from one person, their governor, John White. He, with his experience and connections, was the only one who could navigate the political minefields of England and bring back the supplies they so desperately needed. The decision was a collective, solemn weight on every colonist's shoulders. But for John White, it was a personal burden. Standing on the shores of Roanoke, he faced the most agonizing choice of his life. He had to leave his family behind, his daughter Eleanor, his son-in-law Ananias, and, most cruelly, his granddaughter Virginia, who was just a few weeks old. His heart was a battlefield of emotions, the crushing guilt of a father forced to abandon his loved ones, and the unshakable belief that this temporary sacrifice was their only chance for a future. The farewell was a moment of quiet, unbearable torment. There were no grand declarations, no final speeches, just the simple, desperate exchange of glances, a silent agreement to endure. Eleanor's eyes were full of a resolve that both comforted and terrified him. She held baby Virginia close, a fragile, sleeping symbol of the hope he was leaving behind. As John White embraced them for the last time, he was not just saying goodbye to his family. He was saying goodbye to the future of the colony. He told them he would be back within the year, a promise he desperately hoped to keep. With a heavy heart, he boarded the ship. The sails filled with wind, and the small fleet began its long, treacherous journey back across the Atlantic. The colonists on the shore watched until the ships were mere specks on the horizon, their hopeful gazes fixed on a future that now seemed impossibly far away. The year passed, 2 years, 3. John White's promise turned into a ghost of a memory. The reason for his delay was as immense as the ocean itself. When he arrived in England, the nation was gripped by a national crisis. The year was 1588, and King Philip II of Spain had launched the Great Spanish Armada, a massive fleet of 130 warships with a single, clear purpose: to invade and conquer England. In a state of national emergency, Queen Elizabeth I had commanded that all ships, no matter their purpose, were to be requisitioned for the war effort. Privateers, merchant vessels, and even humble fishing boats were put into service. The entire nation's fate hung in the balance. John White, a man who had left a world of wilderness, now found himself trapped in a different kind of wilderness, a political one. He pleaded with officials, he bargained with ship captains, he used every connection he had to secure a vessel. His pleas were met with polite but firm refusal. His small colony and his personal agony were of no consequence in the face of a war for the survival of the English crown. He watched from the sidelines as the legendary battles of the English Channel unfolded, his heart torn between a patriotic pride for his country and the burning desperation to return to his family. He made several desperate, ill-fated attempts to leave. He managed to secure passage on 2 small ships in April 1588, but they were no match for the Spanish privateers. One was attacked and plundered, and both were forced to return to England. The months turned into years. John White was a prisoner of his own country's war, an artist haunted by the thought of his daughter's fading hope and his granddaughter's growing up without him. The promise he had made now seemed a cruel illusion. It was not until 1590, 2 years after the defeat of the Armada, that he finally found an opportunity. He secured passage on a privateering expedition led by a man named Martin Fernandez. The ship was not going to America for a rescue mission. Its primary goal was to raid Spanish ships for plunder. It was a perilous, unsavory alliance. But for John White, it was his only chance. He took it without a moment's hesitation. 3 years of waiting had come to an end, and he was finally on his way back to Roanoke. But what would he find? The voyage back to the Americas was a grueling 3-month ordeal, a torturous combination of foul weather and the ship's privateering agenda. They raided Spanish ships, a brutal dance of violence and greed that felt a world away from the peaceful colony John White had left. He was a man consumed by a single desperate mission, but he was a passenger on someone else's cruel journey. As they finally approached the North Carolina coastline in August 1590, the familiar shores did nothing to soothe his heart. It was a thick, unnatural fog that greeted them, a chilling veil that obscured the land and muffled the sound of the ocean. It felt less like a homecoming and more like an intrusion into a forbidden, silent place. He sent a party ashore, and their shouts echoed back from the dense wilderness, hollow and without answer. The first sign they found was a strange, silent boat on the beach, with the bow and stern both missing. It was a disturbing omen, but he pushed the feeling aside. He and his crew landed and walked toward the settlement, their boots making no sound on the overgrown path. The silence was more terrifying than any scream. It felt alive, a presence that watched them from the deep forest. He called out his daughter's name, then his granddaughter's. The only response was the whisper of the wind through the tall grass. Where the fort and the houses had stood, there was nothing but an eerie emptiness. The ground was covered in a thick layer of weeds, and the palisade that had been a source of such hard work was gone. All that remained were a few empty cannons and some rusting iron bars. The sense of foreboding was almost unbearable. But then hope flared like a match in the darkness. On a gatepost of the dismantled palisade, they found a single word carved deeply into the wood: CROATOAN. High on a nearby tree, the first 3 letters of the same word were carved. CRO. John White's heart leapt. It was the sign they had agreed upon. He searched frantically for the Maltese cross, the symbol of distress that would have meant his family was in danger. He scoured every tree, every post, every patch of ground. There was no cross. The absence of that simple symbol was a beacon of light in the darkness. It meant they had not been attacked. They had moved willingly to the nearby island of the friendly CROATOAN tribe. His family was alive. His relief, however, was short-lived. A few yards away, they found the chests he had buried before his departure, but they had been dug up. His personal belongings, his books, maps, and paintings were ruined, tossed about in the mud. If the colonists had left peacefully, why would they have disturbed his personal belongings in such a chaotic manner? It suggested a sudden, panicked rush, but if it was a rush, why no cross? The 2 clues contradicted each other, plunging the mystery into a new, more sinister light. As night fell, a powerful storm began to brew. The wind howled through the empty settlement, a mournful lament for the missing. John White spent the night on his ship, tormented by the paradox of hope and despair. The next morning, he gave the order to set sail for CROATOAN Island. He was convinced his family was just a few miles away, but fate, once again, intervened. The next day, as John White's ship prepared to set sail for CROATOAN Island, a furious storm descended upon them. It was a perfect, deadly combination of powerful winds and torrential rain, a weather system that would make any sane sailor turn back. The privateering crew, whose loyalty was to profit and not to the lost, refused to risk their lives and their cargo for a rescue mission. They were a ruthless and superstitious lot, and the eerie silence of the island and the inexplicable mystery had already put them on edge. They had no interest in sailing into what they saw as a cursed place. John White begged and pleaded, offering them gold and valuables, but his words were met with grim resolve. The captain, seeing the mounting anger and fear in his crew's eyes, made the final call. They were sailing for the Caribbean, where the waters were calm and the Spanish ships were rich with loot. His heart shattered. He had been so close, just a few miles from the place where he believed his daughter and granddaughter were waiting. He was a prisoner not only of his country's war, but of the very men who had brought him back. With that, the ships turned east, leaving Roanoke to its fate. He never returned to the Americas. The remaining years of his life were spent in England, a man haunted by a ghost he could never reach. He died in 1593, a broken man whose only lasting legacy was a story of hope and a tragic, unsolved mystery. The first search for the colonist after John White's forced departure was launched in 1602 by another English explorer named Bartholomew Gilbert. He landed on the island and, like White, found nothing but the overgrown remains of the fort. A search party was sent inland but was ambushed and killed by a local tribe. With the loss of his men and supplies, Gilbert was forced to abandon his search and return home. This failed expedition became the last concerted effort by the English to find the lost colony. The new settlement of Jamestown, founded in 1607, brought with it a renewed hope of finding the lost colonists. Its leader, Captain John Smith, heard stories from the local Powhatan Confederacy. The great chief Powhatan told Smith that he had personally ordered his warriors to destroy the Roanoke colony. He claimed the English had taken refuge with a rival tribe, the Chesapeake, and he had killed them all to secure his power. He even provided Smith with artifacts, including a gun barrel and an iron mortar, as proof. This chilling story seemed to fit the evidence of the ransacked chests found by John White. It offered a plausible, albeit brutal, answer. For years it was considered a leading theory. However, the story came from a known deceiver and opportunist, and a deeper look at the documents revealed that Chief Powhatan may have simply been trying to intimidate the Jamestown colonists and prevent them from looking for the lost settlers. For centuries, the mystery of Roanoke was confined to the pages of history books, a haunting ghost story of America's past. But in the 20th and 21st centuries, archaeology and genetic science have shed new, tantalizing light on the puzzle, offering clues that point to a much more complex and hopeful fate. The assimilation theory became the most widely accepted one. The lack of a Maltese cross, the word CROATOAN, and later reports all support the idea that the colonists left the island and merged with the indigenous population. In the 18th century, explorers and settlers in the area began to report sightings of people in the Lumbee tribe who had grey eyes, and spoke a form of archaic English. This was a powerful, if circumstantial, piece of evidence. Today, the Lumbee people have a rich oral tradition that links their ancestry to the Lost Colony. While not an official historical record, it is a compelling narrative that has been passed down for generations. Recent DNA studies have also shown a link between some Lumbee families and the surnames of the Roanoke colonists, suggesting a genetic connection that could only come from intermarriage. The hostile attack theory, while dramatic, has largely been debunked by modern research. Archaeologists have found no evidence of a battle or massacre on Roanoke Island. There are no mass graves, no signs of widespread destruction or violence. The peaceful carvings and the lack of a cross suggest that the colonists left on their own terms, even if they were under pressure from dwindling resources. Modern archaeology has given us the most compelling evidence. In 2012, researchers working with the British Museum discovered a hidden, erased symbol on one of John White's maps. Under a small patch of paper, they found a fortress symbol, which did not appear on the original public map. This marking, now known as a Site X, was located about 50 miles inland from Roanoke Island, in what is now Bertie County, North Carolina. This suggested that a small group of colonists may have moved inland, a theory that supports the assimilation idea. In 2013, an excavation at Site X yielded a tiny, tantalizing find, a pottery fragment that was unmistakably English from the late 16th century. It was too small to be conclusive, but it pointed to the presence of Europeans in the exact location that the map suggested. A subsequent excavation at another inland site, Site Y, in 2015, uncovered more pottery fragments that were clearly of English and Native American origin found side by side. This was a powerful clue, suggesting that the two cultures were living and working together. The evidence, while still not a smoking gun, provides the strongest argument yet that the colonists did not simply vanish, but rather they became a part of a new world, a new culture. The story, however, has also been plagued by hoaxes. In the 1930s, a series of mysterious stones were found near the coast, with cryptic messages carved on them purporting to be from Eleanor Dare. They detailed the death of the colonists. The stones, known as the Dare Stones, were later proven to be forgeries, a cruel trick that added another layer of confusion to an already complex mystery. The story of the Lost Colony of Roanoke is not just a tale of a vanished settlement. It is a profound and enduring American myth. It has been a source of countless books, documentaries, and works of fiction, a cultural touchstone that speaks to our deepest fears and our most fervent hopes. It is a story of colonialism, of first contact, and of the unforgiving wilderness that lay beyond the edge of the known world. In the end, we are left with only the silence and the two words carved into the wood. The question of what happened to the 115 souls remains unanswered. The most compelling evidence points to assimilation, suggesting that the English did not simply vanish, but instead became a part of the land, their blood and culture merging with the people who had lived there for centuries. It's a peaceful, even romantic solution to a horrifying mystery. But the final answer remains elusive. We can never know for certain what became of Virginia Dare, the first child of a new world. Did she grow up in the woods, speaking two languages and living between two cultures? Or did she meet a tragic end that left no trace? The silence of the centuries has not broken, and the words on the tree stand as a testament to a final, tragic message that we can never truly understand. The story of the lost colony of Roanoke will likely never have a final chapter. It exists in the shadowy space between history and legend, a permanent reminder that even with all of our knowledge and technology, some mysteries are destined to remain unsolved. For over 4 centuries, the question of what happened to those 115 men, women, and children has haunted American history. It's a chilling reminder that some of history's most profound truths may forever remain just out of our reach. We're left with an empty settlement and a single word carved into a tree. The truth remains forever lost to time. But now, after hearing the full story, we want to know what you think. What's your theory? Did they join the local tribes, or did a more sinister fate befall them? Share your thoughts in the comments.